Well, hey, Renaissance family, and welcome into the final video in this Neighboring in the Post-Pandemic series that we have been in. This whole deal, we have been trying to put neighboring on your map, placemaking on your map. You know, people are dealing with a lot after the last, year and a half. People are lonely, they're isolated, they're in desperate need of community. We're hearing all kinds of issues with a mental health crisis going on right now in the midst of all of this. We need each other. And so we actually want you to focus on this, not just yourself in the midst of everything that's going on, but focus on your neighbors. We really believe that when Jesus told us to love our neighbors as ourselves, he meant that. And also that he wants us to love our actual neighbors, our literal neighbors, right where he has placed us, right where we are living and doing our lives. If you've missed any of the previous videos before this, I would encourage you to get on our YouTube channel. There's actually a playlist with all of them. We're gonna wrap this up. We've been going through Galatians 5:22 and 23 as kind of the virtues, the ways, the lifestyle that we should kind of be fostering if the Spirit is flowing out of us in our neighborhoods. And we're going to be looking at the final two in this video, which is gentleness and self-control, of those 9 attributes. Definitely not the most exciting 2 words, probably, but I actually think they're 2 of the most important ones, especially when we start thinking about living and neighboring through our faith as Christians. I think gentleness and self-control really impact our disposition and our posture towards our neighbors and how we do everyday life. In fact, I want to break those 2 down to kind of understand that I actually think they're kind of 2 sides of the same coin when we're relating them to neighboring. And I actually want to go backwards really quickly and give you some food for thought, starting with self-control, and have you think. You think self-control is not a word that, of course, that gets us very excited. It's not something that we often desire in any realm. And I think part of it, as Christopher Wright says, we actually misidentify what self-control actually is. That oftentimes we think that it's just harnessing our passions, just literally kind of kiboshing what we actually want to do, and doing less of that, and just reining all of it in. When in fact, Christopher Wright says that really self-control is redirecting and reorienting our passions for the good of ourselves and for others. Our passions are a good thing. They're often God-given things. We just need to direct them. That's what self-control is doing, so that it's actually good for us and it's good for those around us. This is important when we start talking about neighboring, because you see, as Christians, if we know Jesus and if we are growing closer to him, if we're reading his word, if we're in prayer, if we are trying to orient our life towards the things that God deeply desires that are close to his heart, we are going to care for the lost, for the broken, for injustice, for pain. We are going to have empathy towards those things, and we're going to want to do something about them. That's a good thing. The problem often is that Christians have not always done a very good job, and I don't think we have a very good necessarily reputation among a lot of our neighbors of harnessing, of having self-control in those passions, these God-given things. Often, coming from a good place, when we step into our neighborhoods, often we're known as agenda-driven, as treating people as projects, as a means to an end, that we're just trying to get everybody to think and do exactly what we're doing. Often it comes from a good place. We want people to experience Jesus' love as we have, but often our passion isn't necessarily guided in a very good way. We don't actually have self-control in it, and we end up, I think, actually hurting people, or at least in their faith. We actually end up hurting them and their chance of actually discovering the beauty of what Jesus has for them, because it's not done in a very authentic and real way, which is where gentleness comes in on the flip side of that. How should we be acting? Well, we should be acting with gentleness. I think one of the amazing things is when you read the Gospels is that Jesus makes this very clear. In fact, the way that he lays down his life for all people, and you see this in the epistle writers are bringing this out, that God's love is not coercive. It's not manipulative. It's not seeking power or control. That wouldn't be love. And so if we live in those ways, or if we come across in those ways, as Christians sometimes have, and I would say in our culture right now, we have a little bit of a PR problem with some of that. We're not actually, I think, living out Jesus' love in the right way. I love in Matthew chapter 11, very famous passage where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are burdened, all who are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And what does he say? For I am gentle and lowly of heart. That's how Jesus actually identifies himself, as gentle. And I think we see evidence of that when we actually look at Jesus throughout the Gospels. We see how gentle he is, how curious he is, how loving he is, that he never seeks power or control or manipulation to get people to follow him or to know his love. We need to be doing the same thing. We need to be people who are curious, who are loving, who are caring, who don't seem like we're treating our neighbors like projects, who are interested in their lives and their cultures and what's going on. And honestly, I really believe if we live that way, we're going to earn trust, and we'll always have the ability to hopefully earn the right to be heard so we can share the hope that we have in Jesus. But hopefully the way that we've come across and even earning that trust, that people know whether they believe what we believe or not, that we're going to care for them, that being near us is going to be a safe space for them to feel love, to feel acceptance, to feel rest, just as we're trying to live in God's love that way, that we would be an ambassador, we would pass that on in our neighborhoods. And the best place for this to happen, honestly, is in hospitality. I think often it's very hard to figure out, like, how do we relate to our neighbors and get to know them? And I think it's in eating together and getting around the table to one another. And this is one of our big passions at Renaissance, that this is a place where people can feel cared for. And honestly, we're going to feel cared for too among our neighbors if we have the right mindset. I love, in the book, The Neighbors Are Real, Preston Pouteaux, who is kind of inspired this whole video series. He has this amazing quote. He says, in the grand story of human history, most people did not interact with other cultures. Most lived close to family and tribe, sharing a common language, faith, and even food. It was comforting to be close to a familiar experience and people that understand us. Today, we do not live in cloistered tribes, but a diversity. It's definitely true of us here in Boston. Our neighbors may be different than us, but we do not stand at a distance. It is around the table that we experience the gentle, I love that he says gentle, the gentle invitation to cross cultural barriers and see our neighbors with deeper love and gratitude. Cesar Chavez said, if you really want to make a friend, go to someone's house and eat with them. The people who give you their food give you their heart. Your neighbors may speak a different language, eat different food, worship in a different way, or hold to different values, but they are worthy of knowing and caring for. When we eat together, we may discover that the differences are not the barriers we expected, but a joy to discover and know. Wonderful relationships always have a beginning. Your journey into the neighborhood might begin in a kitchen and a round table. That's really the challenge for us. How do we live with this gentle spirit, enjoying the beauty of culture and of people's individual experiences and who they are, not coming with a set of assumptions that we just have everything figured out in all of life and let me just dump on you all the things that I know, but rather curiously getting to know people, viewing them as God's creation, as image bearers that God has uniquely and wonderfully made. We want to know who they are. And hopefully, again, we're going to earn the right to be heard. But even if we're not, we're going to love, we're going to be living obediently in this command to love our neighbors as ourselves, just as Jesus has asked us to. And I think that's going to be good news for our neighbors in our neighborhood. We often, I've experienced this a lot in the last few years, run into people individually. This has happened with several nonprofits that we've been serving. We'll hear people say, you guys are different than any other Christian or church that I've ever been around. You guys don't seem to have an agenda or that you're using us for some means to an end. You just genuinely care, or you don't seem to have the same kind of disposition that others do. That's our goal. We want to break down some barriers. Honestly, I want to break some stereotypes. And I want people to experience who Jesus is, not just this cultural cultural expression of Christianity that often has left a bitter taste in their mouth. So that's your challenge. How can you live with gentleness and self-control in your neighborhood? I think if you do, the Spirit's going to open all kinds of doors that you've never expected. You're going to break down barriers and do amazing things. And overall, again, you're going to be living obediently in what Jesus has asked us to do.